Hello, my name is Guy Carafone. I recently retired from corporate life. Having spent most of my professional career in services finance and operations management, I decided to write a few books on maximizing services business profitability. Maximizing CSS Profitability is one of those books, which I prepared this brief video to tell interested readers about the book. The central theme of the book is maximizing profitability by adopting shared do's and don'ts and best practices based on real-life experiences. This book is broken down into three parts: managing business operations, managing human resources, and managing the financials, following our chapter-by-chapter highlights. Design for Serviceability, or DFS, is a foundational service and support requirement which is important for the following reasons. Ease: technicians can perform routine, preventative, and remedial service. Ease and speed: end users can handle parts replacement on their own. And of course, DFS positively impacts product availability by minimizing downtime. Regarding cost versus value, DFS is not well understood by many product companies. The primary reason: difficulty assessing the financial benefit of investing in DFS. Conversely, doing broad-based repair sweeps for non-DFS built product will be expensive and disruptive. In the subsequent chapters of Part 1, we talk about the typical CSS organizational functions and corresponding best practices. Customer service centers should be nimble and non-bureaucratic structures that are organized around customer needs. One of the primary challenges these centers face is retaining resources. The primary reason: mundane work, in which case empowerment and reward and recognition can work wonders retaining resources. Technical support centers are usually broken down by product line and tech level. Organizations that provide 24/7 support often adopt a follow-the-sun strategy, which means offshoring after-hours support one halfway around the world, for example, India. Nevertheless, one of the primary objectives of technical support centers should be to minimize average cost per call, in which case excellent training programs and tools will help toward that end. Knowledge-based support that is intuitive and user-friendly will contribute to lowering support calls and corresponding cost. Tech-savvy users prefer a knowledge base to talking with a live support agent, whereas non-tech users will typically avoid even the most intuitive and user-friendly knowledge base. On-site service typically represents one of the more significant CSS organizational cost items. Accordingly, there are several cost containment objectives that can be implemented, including the following three. First, maximize remote resolutions and minimize field dispatches, which can be done by placing some of the best techs in the front-end diagnostics and dispatch center. The mistake many companies make is staffing those centers with admin or low-tech resources. Second, maximize coverage area at lowest possible cost, which may mean leveraging third-party service companies, especially for remote areas. Noteworthy: travel time and cost is a major consideration in coverage area strategy. The reason being, travel represents non-productive time coupled with corresponding travel cost. And third, sensible parts replacement. Wholesale trial and error parts replacement represent a costly and wasteful practice. That is particularly true for sensitive parts that require retesting and resealing before being reused. There are two major aspects to parts logistics operations. Inventory planning, which represents the all-important front-end process. Material planners' primary objective should be placing orders for optimal quantities and optimum frequencies. Poor planning can result in parts shortages and/or excess inventory, which will result in customer dissatisfaction and negative impact to the P&L for excess parts write-offs. There are several effective warehousing and distribution strategies that can be implemented, such as centralized warehouses, spoken wheel solutions, regional warehouses, parts and technician vans, and so on. The chosen strategies depend on what works best for the organization. Nevertheless, inventory turns is the primary performance key indicator. The higher the turns, the better. Carrying excess or obsolete inventory represents poor management practice. Such inventory should be written off to the P&L at the time it is recognized as being excess or obsolete. Repair and refurbishment operations are very different processes. Repair entails individual whole unit or component repairs. Whole unit repair is a common alternative for whole unit exchange. Component repair, which is more common, involves repairing defective parts that are returned from service incidents. The categorization of components as repairable versus expendable should be reevaluated from time to time. Refurbishment is a production-like process with many testing stations. Refurbished units are principally used for warranty and contracted service exchange. Excess units are typically sold off. Managers must be careful not to turn these centers into junk collection centers, meaning creating piles of product carcasses and leftover components from cannibalized units that will never be used. Generally speaking, there are two overhead categories. People who actually do work, such as business operations, and people who watch others work, such as analytical and oversight functions. Business operations represent a critical admin function that exists in most businesses. They are typically responsible for business processes and procedures, reporting, customer surveys, and a host of other admin activities. With regard to analytical and oversight functions, the central question must be how many business analysts can be justified on the basis of cost versus return value. There are other aspects of CSS businesses that must also be managed, including managing clients. In this case, we discuss the typical challenges of managing warranty and contracted clients. In particular, strategic accounts who are oftentimes masters at vendor management, meaning managing CSS. Managing vendors. CSS organizations typically engage with several different types of vendors. For example, on-site service vendors, spare parts suppliers, repair vendors, and so on. It is critically important that CSS hold vendors accountable for the same deliverables they are accountable to end clients. Managing assets. Generally speaking, the more independent the CSS organization, the more assets they will be accountable. Nevertheless, the most significant asset they are typically responsible is spare parts inventory. Incidentally, it's important to point out inventory management affects the balance sheet from an asset valuation standpoint and the P&L from a consumption cost standpoint. Part 2 of the book is entirely about managing human resources, which the first chapter focuses on justifying human resources. Justifying existing resources or zero-based budgeting is uncommon in business. Regarding the justification of replacement resources, every replacement resource decision should be viewed as a potential cost reduction opportunity. And finally, justification of additional resources should be principally done on the basis of cost versus return value. In the next chapter, we talk about direct labor resource cost versus value management. Although there is typically a correlation between the number of direct resources and output, resource utilization can be further maximized with standardization, training, and streamlining business processes. In the following chapter, we talk about indirect labor resource cost versus value management. In this case, the correlation between the number of indirect resources and output should not be linear. Furthermore, it's important to point out indirect resources have varying impact on profitability, which is oftentimes exaggerated. In the last chapter of Part 2, we talk about the use of external versus internal resources. There are times when using external resources makes more sense. Leveraging low-cost offshore resources is not always the best choice. The reason being, there are typically a number of unavoidable challenges involved with offshoring. In part 3, we talk about managing the financials. The first chapter focuses on managing the CSS P&L, which is one of the foundational questions. Should CSS be managed as a profit center or a cost center? With profit centers, there is more accountability, self-sufficiency, and drive to do your best. Whereas with cost centers, there is less accountability and more reliance on product BU support. CSS cost management is more challenging than revenue management. The primary reason? CSS is largely a people cost business. And of course, there is also significant infrastructure cost involved. CSS revenue management essentially boils down to managing the 4 listed billing streams. In the final chapter of the book, we have a fairly lengthy discussion regarding maximizing profitability, principally focused on managing cost and revenue drivers. The order in which we discuss the drivers more or less follow the order the book has been written. Managing cost drivers include the following items. Introducing products that are designed with serviceability in mind. Implementing efficient and cost-effective cost center operations. Implementing intuitive and user-friendly knowledge base. Delivering contracted service level, not significantly more or less. Maximizing remote resolutions while minimizing field dispatches. Maximize field operations coverage area at the lowest possible cost. Minimize trial and error parts replacement. Implementing optimal parts logistics, repair, and refurbishment strategies. Cost effectively managing clients, vendors, and direct and indirect labor resources. Managing revenue drivers include the following. Billing clients for delivered services level and minimizing concessions. Aggressively marketing and selling extended warranty and billable service contracts. Maximizing time and material billing, which is typically very profitable. Also, consider selling service contracts to support co-located other vendor products. And finally, I make a few closing comments regarding takeaways from reading this book. Taking advantage of the many profit improvement ideas I shared is a good thing, whereas taking advantage of your clients is never a good idea. Customers expect and deserve return value for money spent on services. Once customers sense service provider has taken advantage of them, you can say goodbye to those customers. Getting them back or finding replacement customers is guaranteed to be more costly. Be fair and respectful to all of your customers, and they will be loyal in return. In service businesses, customer loyalty is one of the most important keys to success. This book is available on Amazon.com in both ebook and paperback format. The link is shown below. I also included a link to my website if you're interested in knowing about other books I've written and a book I'm currently writing. Thank you.